Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Backseat Driver. In today's episode, we will be talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, a little bit about the F2 as well, and yeah, just going over what I thought of the race, how the drivers did, how the teams did, and yeah, let's just get into it. Um, so why not start talking about F2? I think F2, the sprint race in F2 this weekend was probably the best race of the whole weekend, including the F1. Yeah, great race. Leaders within seconds of each other. Ayumu Iwasa comes out on top. Great race. Victor Martin's looking immense, getting pole by 7/10 in F2, which is a lot in F2. In F1 with Red Bull these days, it doesn't seem that too much. Um, yeah, and yeah, in the sprint race, Martins did a good job to finish on the podium after starting 10th because they reversed the top 10 for the sprint race from qualifying in F2. So great job from him. Umasa did a great job to hold the pressure behind of Martins and Daruvula, who also did a fantastic job to finish third. Yeah, just a great race and just lots of scrapping, and I loved it. Feature race wasn't as good. Lots of gaps everywhere and sort of just I feel like tyre strategy sort of, yeah, it just wasn't a good race. And I think, yeah, it was an all right race, but it wasn't as good as the sprint race. Martin spinning out from the net race lead was a bit of a stinker for him. Porsche had a stinky weekend. He qualified third, but in the sprint, he slammed into Ollie Behrman. And then in the feature race, I think he was just scared to make moves because he was slow. He was just really slow. He finished outside the point, so I don't really know what happened to him in the end. I think he just lost a bit of confidence. And I think Saudi Arabia in general is a confidence track. So not having confidence after slamming into someone turn one, it's a big thing. And I think it's a shame because I think Teo Porcher is a title contender. I think he has potential. So yeah, although he's in his third season of F2, so I don't know. It's you can't say he has as much potential as other drivers, but he's still only like 20 years old, so can't really say that he doesn't. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say on the F2, to be honest. I think it's a very sort of short summary, but yeah, no, I think as it stands, Ralph Boschung leads the championship rather fascinatingly, followed by Teo Porcher and then Frederick Vesti, who won the feature race. Good job by him, actually. He looked quick. He probably could have beaten Martins on pace because the Premers look quick on the feature race, which is good. But yeah, no, F2's looking good this year. Just lots of talent, and I really am. I'm excited to see how it keeps going because I think at the minute we can clearly see. I don't think Boschung. I think Boschung's fine, but he's not as talented as many others around him. So I think that it'll be Martins seems very good. So I think Porsche, Martins. I mean, maybe Vesti could be challenging. Daruvula, Hauger, I think is definitely with the shout. Had a bit of I think he had a bit of bad luck. Can't remember what happened to him, but I feel like he had a bit of bad luck in the race. Or yeah, no, he did actually. No, he did quite well in both races. Now I think about it, he had bad luck in qualifying, and then ended up getting a point in the sprint, and then coming up to fifth in the feature, which is very good. I think he's showing finally he has got ability. Because last year he had a bit of he didn't have the best time because of just a lot of bad luck and yeah, just things didn't go his way last year. So hopefully this year it looks a lot better now that he's also with MP, who seem to just be getting it right. So yeah, yeah, I think that's F2. Cool. Let's talk about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Formula One. Race rating. Now I'm going to give this race a 4 out of 10. Now the reason for that is so 5 is bang average, right? It's the run of the mill race, right? But 4, I can't give it higher than a 4 because I think for the most part, the gaps were all there. There were so many gaps throughout the field. There wasn't much like in the way of close battles, you know? It was very much like spread out through the field. Teammates were often 2 by 2. Even strategy didn't really have any play in the game because it was relatively low tyre wear. But also on top of that, it's a case of the safety car kind of basically made the strategy. But I can't rate it lower than a 4 because, we had some good moments. Alonso taking the lead at the start was great. Verstappen coming all the way up to second was great. A few good good moments, but I think Madison and Tsunoda battle for the last point. Good moments don't make an overall good race, and I think those few moments drag it up from being lower, but they don't drag it above average, I think, or to average. They just make it's a slightly below average race. I was slightly disappointed with it, especially with the anticipation built up with Verstappen and Charles starting lower down. You thought it'd be more exciting, but it just wasn't. Yeah. In the end, can't really give it much higher than a 4. So 4 out of 10 it is, which is a lot worse than the Bahrain Grand Prix, which was a 5.5, which was 5.5 when I gave it. So not bad, but a couple of average races to start the season, but it is what it is. I'm sure there'll be some amazing races later on, but hopefully, well, we'll find out, won't we? Okay, so now I think it's time to talk about the teams and the drivers. Let's start from the top. Or should we start from the bottom? Let's start from the bottom, actually, this time. Yeah, let's start with Williams. Okay, as a team, I'm going to have to give Williams a 5. Now, the reason I said, okay, they're just bang average, because the expectation is Williams looked like they could be quite quick. They thought, they looked like they had some decent pace. The car felt very good. In qualifying, Alex and Logan made, I think, the car they delivered was fine. I think it wasn't as good as people were expecting, but I think that was fine. I think they did a good job in general in the race as well. I think that particularly, they benefit from the safety car. They did a good job. But I think the brake failure for Alex or whatever problem he had meant that there's on them reliability. So I gave him an average rating because I think if they'd done well, if Alex had stayed in the race, and I think if they'd gotten a high sort of between like 11th to 12th or something, then or maybe even got points, then I would have given them higher. But with Alex out of the race, can't really give them more higher than 5. But it's good signs for Williams, I think, overall, the fact that they do have some pace. So yeah, can't really begrudge them a few points. In terms of their drivers, I gave Albon a 5. I think, to be honest, I think that Albon did a good job. He didn't get out of Q1, which I think he could have done. So that's disappointing. And I think he was doing a good job in the race before his brake failure. So I think overall, I don't want to give him higher than a 5 because of the fact that he could have gotten a Q1, but I don't want to give him below because I think he was just doing a solid job. Yeah. Logan, 6 out of 10 for him this time. Both downgrades from last race, but I thought Logan set a really good lap in Q1, like a really good lap before it got deleted for the track limits, which was, I'll be honest, it was on the start-finish straight because he crossed the white line. And I know, it's rules, but it is harsh. And I think that lap was really good, like really, really good. So it was enough to get him out of Q1 actually before it got deleted. And I think it was a harsh one. I understand the point, but yeah, he really didn't get anything from his crossing the white line while he was on the start-finish straight. So listen, it is what it is. But I think really the only reason I can't give him higher is because, simply put, he didn't get another lap in. He lost his head a bit. And I think that's where the inexperience shows. And I would otherwise give him higher. And I think, but he showed a lot this weekend. I think as well, after Alex retired, he was their only hope. And the Williams clearly didn't have that much pace, which is a shame. But he managed to hold back both McLarens for quite a while, which is impressive. And yeah, I can't really take away from his performance. I think if he'd not lost his head, he would have gotten a higher rating. But I think 6 out of 10. I did think he did a good job, especially relative to what maybe people were expecting of him in the first couple of races. So I've got to give him credit. He did a fantastic job in qualifying that first lap. Sorry, anyway. After that, he didn't do such a good job. But yeah. Cool. Let's move on to AlphaTauri. Now, what is going on there? Franz Tost said he doesn't trust his engineers anymore, which is really bold. I mean, I don't want to be like, it's a bit, there's a difference between, no blame culture and pure blame culture. And he's gone for the pure blame culture, which is, I have mixed feelings about it. But Franz Tost is a ruthless guy. We already knew this, but Yeah, that's mad that he said that out loud in public. And I think, but it is weird though that AlphaTauri a few years ago fighting for some of the best positions, and now they're just not there anymore. I don't know what's going on. Like there's something really wrong. I think the correlation from the wind tunnel to the track must be rough or something. Like is something's wrong? Because if his engineers are telling him we found pace, I genuinely believe that they probably have. It's just that other teams either find more or they're not getting the pace they expect out of the car. Now, I don't know if that's yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, to be honest. It's really weird. But to be honest, this weekend, the car that they produced was again not very good. But I'm gonna have to give them I gave them a 4 out of 10, I think, because I think the car they produced wasn't very good, but they maximized what they could have done. I mean, so nearly getting a point was good. So I feel like I can't give them below a. I have to. I can't. The car they produced was just not very good, so I can't really give them a very high rating. So I think 4 is fair. I don't think. I don't think it's yeah 4. I think is fair. Um, yeah, and then on the drivers themselves, Nick De Vries. Yeah, he didn't have the best qualifying again. He didn't have the best. I mean, his race was fine. Um, it needs to be said that yeah, he didn't do as well as Yuki. Yuki did a great job. I mean, they definitely got lucky because Yuki got the safety car at the perfect time for him, and he smashed it. He used it to an absolute maximum advantage, which is all you can do when the opportunity presents itself. But Nick, I think overall it's clear to see that Nick clearly isn't matching Yuki at the minute. And I think whether or not that's because I don't think that's anything to do with Nick being poor. I think that's to do with Yuki himself taking a bit of a step up and progressing a bit more. And I think Nick, Nick did a fine job, but I don't think that I think we saw what the car could potentially do given the right circumstances with Yuki. So I'm going to give it Nick a 4 overall because I think he again outqualified by his teammate, didn't outperform as well in the race. It's all relative. At the end of the day, his teammates are outdoing him. So 4 out of 10. And Tsunoda, I'm giving a 7 because again did well against Nick, but also in the race he nearly got a point. He held off till like one of the last couple of laps. So I'm really impressed overall with Yuki's performances so far. I think that car doesn't necessarily. He's got 2P11s, and I think obviously it's very harsh he hasn't got a point yet. But I think it's clear to see that the car in his hands does have potential to get points. Nick has got a bit of lucky. I'm happy to admit that, but yeah, I think Yuki clearly has taken some step forward and is progressing. So that's good. But I think, yeah, I think I'm excited to see if he can keep the consistency up because 2P11s that's very consistent. He's been very quick. He's been very, he's generally been very good. And I think, yeah, 7 out of 10 is a fair rating. He's one of the up. He's had a good performance. This race. Moving on to Haas. Qualifying trim looked decent. Race trim less decent. But still like there or thereabouts on the fringes of the points. I've got to say, I'm generally there's pace of the car clearly, and I think in the right day they'll get some points, no problem. In fact, they did literally this race they got a point from K-Mag, but I think it's good to see that Haas is still there or thereabouts, even if they're not as high as they were last year. But last year, first year new regs, it's always a bit weird, but yeah, overall 5 out of 10 because I don't think they did a particularly exceptional job with any getting a point is a good job, but I don't think anything exceptional. I don't think they were they were pretty average for me. I don't think they were brilliant. And I think it's kind of in terms of expectations, this is roughly what I expected in terms of being sort of upper mid, like near the points. I guess you can see that happening. I don't know if I said that in my before the race, like the episode before the race, but if I didn't and I said something completely different, then yikes. But I don't know. To me, it's just like I wasn't really expecting them to get points, but they did, which is fair. But then the circumstances played out that they could. So I don't know. I just don't feel like giving them above 5. It feels harsh to give them a 5 actually, but I think I'm going to stick with it. In terms of their drivers, now Hulk again out qualified K-Mac, great, but in the race he slipped back again. I don't know what's going on. It was a lot closer this time at least. He was only like 8-9 seconds behind. In fact, he was exactly 6 seconds behind, I believe. But yeah, no, so it was a lot closer, but yeah, Hulk just seems to be a little bit lacking in the race compared to K-Mag. And whether that's because he's a bit rusty, it's been a bit of a while. He's been out of F1 for 3 years, but could be that. So we'll see how he progresses throughout the season. But yeah, just lacking a little bit. I'm a bit disappointed so far. His qualifying is great, but his races have been, and that's where the money is really, the races. So yeah, giving a 4 out of 10 for that. Yeah, just not performing as much in the race. Good qualities, bad races. Not bad races, but just not as good races. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe he had some problem. I don't know. Just probably had a bad start. Maybe that's something he needs to work on. K-Mag, I'm giving a 6 out of 10. Did a good job, didn't he? Yeah, did a good job. Didn't out-qualify his teammate, which dragged him down a little bit, but he bold move to overtake Tsunoda for the last point, so give it credit for that. Yeah, I think he did a good job overall this weekend. I think I was more impressed with him than Hulkenberg by a fair way, so 6 out of 10 seems fair to me. Yeah, I think he's been very impressive so far this season in terms of what I was expecting versus Hulkenberg. I thought I would get more consistency out of Hulkenberg and K-Mag getting higher highs. But it seems to me that K-Mag is being consistent and quick, and Hulkenberg is quick and qualifying, but over the course of the race, he's slightly less quick and consistent. So interesting to see that be that way, but you never know. It could reverse quite easily. Okay, Aston bloody Martin. Aston, again, second quickest car quite easily on the day. I think Aston Martin clearly has pace. They're clearly the only challenge to Red Bull, even though they're not really a challenge at this point. Yeah, I'm not gonna give him a 10 like I did in Bahrain, but I'm gonna give him an 8 because again, the car was great, but now the expectation is the car is gonna be great. You expect them to produce. The reason they're not getting it, I was maybe gonna give him a 9, but then I think remembered, Stroll had a retirement, so I have to say that drags him down. Unreliability always drags a team down, so it has to be an 8, I think. 9, I think, would require perfect everything, and I think, as a team, they didn't quite nail everything, and I think especially with the Alonso's penalty, that was a risk they perhaps the risk they took with the rear jack. I mean, it could be just like it's not really a risk, really shouldn't be, but clearly there wasn't. Clearly, it was a bit of a 50-50 on that one, and I think they made the right choice by revoking the penalty in the end. But I think I think it's one of those where, I think there's an unnecessary drama, I guess, caused. So 8 out of 10. Could be an 8.5, but I'm sticking with an 8. In terms of the drivers, your boy Lance. This is a hard one because he retired so early. So I'm going to really have to base this purely on, but it's not, because that's not his fault. I've got to base this more on his performance at the weekend. And I think he was shy of Alonso for sure. I think he qualified behind Alonso and Russell, and I think Sainz as well, if I'm not mistaken. And as a result, you got to say he was a few tenths off. So you got to say that you can't give him a full super high rating, but you can be generally impressed over the course of the weekend. The fact that he's not too far behind Alonso. I mean, in qualifying, he was a couple tenths back. That's pretty good. And also, I think in the race, the first lap, he made a brilliant move on Carlos Sainz. I was literally kind of yelling. I was going, oh, go on. I was like, yeah, that's a good move. I was like, credit where credit's due. Shame about the retirement. I think he could have probably split the Mercedes. I don't think he could have maybe couldn't have beaten George on raw pace, but I think he could have split the Mercedes. So yeah, I'm going with 7 out of 10. Because he showed good signs. I think he was closer than I expected to Fernando. And, Fernando obviously is Fernando, so what can you expect? You expect brilliant things from him. And on Fernando, I'm giving him a 9.5. Now, why not a full 10? Well, that car is the second quickest. You'd expect it to end up, on the podium, but he was out of his grid box, which cost him that 5-second penalty, which, in my opinion, is a mistake. That's a mistake, and you can't give him a 10 out of 10 when he made a mistake. And in my opinion as well, he could have gotten a 9, but I think his start really dragged him up to 9.5, just about, because his start was great and he got past Perez. So, yeah, I think 9.5 is a fair rating for Alonso. I think he's been the highest rated driver on average this season. He's been insanely good so far. So he's still got it. 41 years old, still got it. I hope that the likes of I hope Lewis can be like that in a few years. I think that'll be good to see, like, 2 drivers like that at the top. Oof, brilliant. Okay, that covers Aston, who are just, so far my probably my team of the season in terms of expectations. But Red Bull is, I think, objectively team of the season so far. But it's only been 2 races out of 23, so I don't know why I'm saying that. Okay, Alfa Romeo. Yeah, really weird, this one. Yeah, they were both out in Q2. So the pace was sort of a bit meh, you could say. But not bad. Like, I wouldn't say the pace was bad. But the race, they both had stinkers. Well, not both. No, well, Zhou didn't have a stinker. He didn't have a great race, but Bottas had a stinker. And I think that was probably because of the fact that I think because Oscar Piastri had damage, and I think he got caught under his car and damaged his underfloor, so that cost him a lot of downforce. So he's just losing seconds a lap. So I think it's fair to say that Bottas had some issues which probably weren't his fault. And I think, Zhou didn't have a great race. I'm talking about the team here, aren't I guess, the team didn't seem to have a car, and I guess overall their strategy seemed a bit meh. The thing is, they didn't really do anything. That's the thing. It's weird. Like, nothing. Bottas had damage, and Zhou had 2 stops. I think the second one, he stopped before the safety car, then ended the safety car. So in the end, he didn't really have anything to fight with. So I think I've got to give him a 3. I know it's pretty harsh, but there's just nothing there. There's nothing really to. Because usually, if you're average, you have maybe a couple of negatives, a couple of positives. There's just a lot of negatives and not much positive to say about them. So 3 out of 10. And on the drivers, I just said, Zhou had a bit of a weird race. Was a bit of nowhere, I thought. He was ahead of Nick. He was just ahead of Nick de Vries, but quite a ways back from Hulkenberg in 12th. So I think, I'm gonna have to give Zhou a 5, because I think he did an average. The thing is, I think he did an average job. So, and he outqualified Bottas as well, which is a positive. So I think in the end, even though his race was a bit anonymous, he outqualified Bottas, which I think makes it about an average weekend, because he didn't have a great race, but he didn't have a bad race either. Versus Bottas, so I'm giving him a 3. Definitely a bit of a stinky race for him, because I think, it wasn't his fault. He had the damage, so I got to say it's probably a bit unlucky and it's a bit harsh to give him this. But he also did get qualified by Zhou. He just didn't look very on the pace. And the damage really just put paid to his weekend. I think he was just incredibly slow after that damage. And I think, I don't know, he just didn't look that good this weekend overall. So I have to give him a 3. So it's a shame, but relative to his teammate, he wasn't as quick the whole weekend, and his teammate didn't do particularly brilliantly either. So that has to be a 3 for me. McLaren, Formula 1 team. After the -1 I gave them in Bahrain, I was thinking, is it going to be another -1 given their performance? They finished 17th and 15th. And no is a simple answer. I'm not giving them another -1 because I don't think it was necessarily their fault that they had the damage. The cars were back because of the fact that Piastri broke his front wing on Gasly, which was Gasly's fault. And then it hit Norris's front wing, which damaged his front wing, which meant that they both had to stop for noses, which meant they were at the back. And the safety car helped them drag them back in, but I think McLaren is very draggy, which didn't allow them to progress through the field. And on top of that as well, I think strategy they were sort of, I think overall, so the reason I wouldn't give them like a 5, because they didn't do anything wrong. Also because their car got to Q3, Piastri got to Q3, Norris made a mistake and Piastri got to Q3. So clearly there's pace in that car. They're going to be fine. I think that's the main thing, is that, especially after back, if the upgrades are good, they're going to be all right. Like, they're going to fight for the upper midfield. I think the pace is there. I think it's clear to see the pace is there. But the reason I'm giving them a 3 is because of the fact that the car was very draggy. They produced a very draggy car, and it's they can't overtake. They could barely overtake Logan Sargent. I think that pretty much sums it up right now. Yeah. If you can't like I think it's just one of those things where I think they have pace in the car. They're just slow in a straight line. They're draggy. They just got so many issues to sort out. So I'm giving it a 3. They didn't do anything too much wrong, but I think given where the car's at, given expectation around McLaren, I can't give them above anything higher than a 3 at the minute. On the drivers themselves, Piastri, he did a great job in qualifying to get Q3. Contact with Gasly, not entirely his fault. Not his fault, really, to be honest. So got sent to the back. Managed to hold onto his tyres very well and overtake Sargent and be quicker than Norris, which is impressive. So I've given him a 6, which might be a bit low, perhaps, but I think you know, it was good to see signs of progress, but it's hard to give him higher when I can't see in the race what he could actually do without any bad luck. It's very difficult to give a high rating for someone who finished low down in a car that could do better when there's mitigating circumstances around it. And then Norris, 3.5, because he made a mistake in qualifying that meant he was out in Q1 and he was slower than Oscar in the race. I could have actually given him a lower rating because I think he was definitely one of the worst drivers this weekend. But again, it's difficult to say how his race could have gone without the damage on lap 1, because otherwise I think he could have potentially done quite well. So, but I think based just off qualifying and the fact that he wasn't as quick as his teammate, he wasn't that far off though. So 3.5 out of 10 for me. Alpine. Alpine's a weird one. Like I said, I wasn't expecting much from Alpine. They all talk and no action, but they were quick. They were decent. They weren't as quick as the Mercedes. They were not as quick as the Ferrari either, in the race trim anyway. Well, on qualifying trim for that matter. But yeah, they were good. I was impressed for the most part with Alpine. Double points. They were very clear. It was kind of one of those things where they were like in a bit of a no man's land because they are a lot They were a lot quicker than the teams behind them, but they were a lot slower than the teams ahead of them. Strategy was fine. They used they used the safety car effectively. Yeah, I think 7 out of 10 because they did a good job. They did a good job. I think, they both got double points. You can't really fault that. I think 7 out of 10. They executed well. They had a good car. Brilliant. Well done from them. I think they proved that my expectations of them not doing well were misplaced, and I think fair play to them for that. Okay. Now we have the drivers. Gasly, right. So Gasly wasn't far off Ocon in the end. He did finish behind Ocon, but he was only 1.9, 2 seconds back, really. And in qualifying, he wasn't that far off either. I think he was a few tenths. Not as good as, obviously quite a few positions difference maybe, but yeah, I think overall, I think he did fine, but I would probably give him, I probably would have given him, I could have given him a lower rating because he did make contact with Piastri, which was entirely his fault, and it was unnecessary, and it cost Piastri his race. So I could have given him a lower rating, but I thought 6 was fair because relative to his teammate, he didn't do a bad job in the end. And yes, he caused that incident, but it was a very minor incident, just bad luck for Piastri that it transpired the way it did. But I think I'm happy with the 6, and Ocon I'm going to give a 7, just above, because I think he outperformed Gasly all weekend, did what needed to do, was quick, consistent, outqualified Lewis in qualifying, which was very impressive. It needs to be said. Yeah. So overall, 7 out of 10 for Ocon. Sorry. Very much made up for his stinky first race. It needs to be said. Yeah. So I think Alpine looking good, and I think if they can show that pace consistently, then great. But it's a bit of a weird one in the race. It seems to me that there's a clear top. There's a clear Red Bull top. Then the next three, relatively close. Then Alpine. Then the rest. It's all a bit confusing at the minute. Yeah, I just wish everything would be a bit closer. There's definitely been a close up of the field, but it's just not. Yeah, it's just not like what you'd hope for. I mean, it's 1.2 seconds in Q1 the gap, which is small, but in Q1, it's Q1. This thing is still. So I don't know. Mercedes. Expectations were low because I think they were well. All this crisis talk before the race, you were like, well, they can't do that well, then can they? And they did a decent job. George did a great job in his qualifying lap. Lewis didn't do such a good job, but yeah. George did a great job in his qualifying lap, and in the race, they were pretty even on pace. I think George probably had the edge, but also Lewis had the worst strategy overall, I think. So swings and roundabouts, I guess. So yeah, I think George, I think overall, Mercedes did an okay job. I think it was better than they expected. I think overall, they were just fairly okay. They were quicker than Ferrari, but I think that's more because of Ferrari being crap. But yeah, I think Mercedes did a good job overall, and I think 5 out of 10 is fair because I don't think they did anything particularly brilliant. It's not like they were this world-class strategy for either driver. In fact, I think they actually ended up they didn't do a great job with Lewis's strategy because he had to go on mediums for 32 laps, which was a lot. Yeah, so I think I think 5 out of 10, fair enough. They produced a decent car and they didn't do. It could have got higher because they did quite well, but also at the same time, not brilliant because of the fact that they messed up Lewis's strategy a bit and they didn't really do anything special. So 5 out of 10. On the drivers themselves, George, I'm giving a 7. He had a good race. I've got to say I'm impressed. He had a good race. He outperformed Lewis the whole weekend. He was much more comfortable in the car. Outqualified Lewis by a few tenths, which is unheard of, really. And yeah, had a great race. And he was quicker than Lewis in the race. Although I must say that he didn't in the race when he was like, "Oh, Alonso got his 5-second penalty. Let's fight later." I mean, let's fight later. I mean, I thought that was a bit like annoying because I was like, "Mate, Lewis is on mediums. You're on hards. Let's fight later. His mediums will be dead. There's not going to be any fighting later." And I think he knew that. It's just silly. I think it would have been fair to swap the positions. If Lewis can't get past Alonso, which I don't think he could have, I think he's had more chance, but I think he could have. Then they swap back. Simple put, easy sorted. I think that would be fair because I think Lewis had. I think there was probably a bit more pace for Lewis, and I think at the end of the day his tires got destroyed at the end because he spent so long. He spent so much of the race that close to Russell that his tires were going to get destroyed anyway. So. And towards the end, he lost a couple of seconds. In his last 2 or 3 laps, he really had bad tyre wear because he lost like 3 seconds maybe to Russell in the last couple of laps. So yeah, 7 for George and 5 for Lewis. He didn't have a great qualifying, didn't feel right in the car. His race performance was a lot better. I think he did a good job on given the strategy wasn't brilliant. He was on slow hards to start with, and he wasn't very happy. Then on mediums, he was a lot better, but he had tyre wear. So he got a bit screwed by Ferrari, but I think he did an average job. I think getting 5th place, he performed a great move. I loved his little switch back on Sainz. Before Sainz got overtaken by 2 stonking moves. Yeah, overall, I can't really fault, I can't really give him below a 5 because I think he didn't do anything wrong. Qualifying was a bit poor from him, but in the race he was a lot better, I think. Yeah, 5's fair. George getting 7th, I think is fair as well because he outperformed Lewis and I think was generally better than I expected because I expect Lewis to beat George most weekends, but clearly this weekend George had the confidence in the car that Lewis didn't have, and credit to George for that. Ferrari. Yeah. Now, it's always painful talking about Ferrari because I'm not a Ferrari fan. I'll be honest. I mean, no. That sounds harsh. What I mean is, I'm not a Ferrari fan out and out. I love F1, which means by default you gotta love Ferrari. Ferrari is F1 and F1 is Ferrari. And listen, you just want Ferrari needs to be fighting at the front, and they were 4th quickest car comfortably in the race. Like it was bad. It was just bad how they just and already needing a second ECU control electronics for Leclerc already after 2 in the second race. I mean, yeah, poor, really poor. And the pace was nowhere. They had no pace. And, with Charles, the engineer didn't tell him to push between the safety car lines, which meant Lewis jumped him in the safety car stop. And Charles was rightfully annoyed. And again, these are all mistakes that keep happening. It's good to see Fred Vasseur calling them out. Admittedly, blame culture is not always the most positive and helpful thing for a team, but I think there's a difference between blame culture and holding people accountable in the right way. So, like saying, like, okay, we know we're making mistakes, we know we need to improve, but not targeting anyone in particular is the right way to go about it. Versus being like, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, and just rather than like targeting people, making changes is necessary in terms of maybe management structure and personnel, but not targeting anyone in particular. You know what I mean? Like when they say, okay, we made this mistake, not going, your fault for making that mistake. It's like, okay, we as a team made this mistake, we need to improve. I think that's a right way to go about that. I think that seems like the way he is going about it. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But also, I think also as well he wants to stamp his authority, which I think is part of it. I think he wants to stamp his authority on the team, and I think that's probably why he's being so, bullish about his attitude. But yeah, no, terrible performance for me. Worst team of the weekend by far. 2 out of 10. Car wasn't quick. Just 10 place completely for Charles. The only bit of credit I can give them is that they played a blinder before the safety car with overcutting Stroll. Fair play, great job for them. Overcut worked beautifully. Well done to them for that. Yeah, credit where credit's due. However, it didn't really matter in the end, and they clearly were the fourth worst car. So, end of the day, whatever. It's one of those, you can play that blinder, but end of the day, if your car's not quick and you just underperform, then you can't really take too much credit for that. And the drivers, Sainz, 5 out of 10. Didn't look very good. He was off by Leclerc by a long way in qualifying. I mean, Leclerc put in a brilliant lap, don't get me wrong, but off by a long way in qualifying. In the race, he was okay. I think I feel it's harsh to give him less than a 5 because I don't think he did anything particularly wrong. He qualified behind George, but George just put in a stonking lap. So I think that's not the end. He was a few tenths off though. So overall, I think 5 is fair. Very bang average race for Sainz. Car wasn't there, and he finished ahead of Charles, which is fair enough. But yeah, not much to talk about for him. Charles, I put 7 because his qualifying lap was very good, and the race he did move forwards quite well. But once he got to his teammate, he wasn't able to really do anything about it. It was in a train with him the whole race and didn't overtake him at all. Yeah, he ended up finishing like 8 seconds behind. So clearly, I think as well, pace wasn't really that there for him. So overall, I think 7 out of 10. I think good qualifying, which drags him up. Good overtakes to start the race, drags him up. But pace wasn't really there in the latter half, so drags him a bit down. So 7, I think, is a fair rating for your boy Charles. And finally, Red Bull. Now, of course, Red Bull are clearly the quickest car by a country mile. They're a second a lap quicker on race trim, which is absolutely outrageous, which is a like of domination we haven't seen since Mercedes. And I know Lewis said, "Oh, we we haven't ever seen a car that quick." You're right, you haven't seen a car that quick because you've beaten a car that quick. The 2014 and 16 Mercedes spring out to mind. The 2015 Merc was, I don't know if it was purely operational, but they seemed to make a few more mistakes in 2015. They didn't seem to be as clear in 2015 as 2014 and 16, because you take Singapore for an example. They were really off the pace there, which they said they had in 2014 and 16 a little bit, but the advantage was so big that they didn't notice that they still won. So 2014, 16 spring to mind. 2020 as well. Weird thing about 2020 though is that I think it's weird. Like I feel like they were super dominant, but also felt like that was a really crazy year. So to me, I don't feel like that was as dominant as it actually was, because it was super dominant. But I think because of all the craziness that year with everything going on around them, and they kept made a few mistakes in Monza and all that stuff, and Sakir and all of that stuff. So yeah, but yeah. Anyway, Red Bull, brilliant car, strategy was fine, handled things well, 9 out of 10. Would give them higher, but drive shaft failed on Max. In the end, got P2, so not that much impact. So that's why it's not down further. But drive shaft on qualifying, which would have made the race somewhat more interesting. Although he still tore his way through, so it is what it is. Drivers, let's start with Verstappen. Half a second clear of everyone before qualifying failure. Yeah, I think he was, hard to judge, but he was very quick overall the weekend. He came up to P2. But the thing is, it's kind of expected. I mean, Alonso did say he'd get to second by lap 25, and unbelievably, he passed Alonso for second place on lap 25. So Mystic Alonso or Magic Alonso strikes again. So fair enough. Like, yeah, he was quick. He did it. But things I think the expectation for him is to be that quick. If he'd got pole and been able to finish qualifying, he probably would have won the race and been the best driver of the weekend for me. But I think overall, 9 out of 10 because of the fact that he clearly also was on the pace of Checo. In the race, he only was able to match the pace of Checo, which I think says a lot about Checo A and B and back about the fact that maybe Max wasn't as quick in the race as in qualifying, but maybe not. But he's clearly going to win the championship, I think. Like, we can pretend it's going to be a battle between Perez and Verstappen, but Verstappen is the best driver on the grid as it stands. There's really no question about it on form. In that car, especially, he is the best driver on the grid. That's not to say the car is everything. He's not doing a brilliant job. I'm saying that the car is suited for him, which makes perfect sense because why wouldn't you do that? Suit your best driver. So, makes sense. And yeah, in that car, he's smashing it. And he's been smashing it for years now. So, fair play to him. Perez, 9.5 out of 10. Slightly better than Verstappen for me because I wasn't expecting him to do as well as he did. In terms of pace, he got pole. He did the job he needed to on Saturday. Nothing particularly special there, but great job. And he absolutely nailed the race. He obviously had a bad start, which drags him. He would have got a 10 if it wasn't for his bad start. Honestly, because he didn't put a foot wrong the whole race, except for that start. Got back past Alonso, never looked back, handled the race really well, handled the safety car very well. Everything worked for him. Smashed it. Matched Verstappen on pace. Beautiful, like well managed, well executed. Can't fault him except for that start. So 9.5 out of 10 for Perez. I think it was beautiful for him to have a race win. King of the streets. I do hope he can take it to Verstappen, but I don't see it happening. So, but yeah. That's all the drivers and teams ratings, which is tiring. Overall, race was fine. I think, I'm hoping Australia. Australia's the one of the few times where Europeans have to wake up early. So, sorry to any other Europeans out there, and I'm sure that some people like in the Americas and the West Coast of America are probably like, yeah, this is a 10 p.m. It's a bedtime. Let's watch it and go to sleep. And then people in Australia are like, oh, we'd have to wake up at 4 a.m. Thank God for that. So yeah, I think I'm hoping it's interesting. 4 DRS zones this year, which is interesting. It'd be interesting to see how it goes. I hope it's a fun race. I hope it's better than the last two we've had. Overall season has got off to a very average start. A bit confusing as to what's going on with like the field spread. It seems like Red Bull's in a league of its own, and then it's the rest. But there's also seems to be a weird gaps, sort of randomly. But the gaps are small, but they're big enough that they still end up appearing. But maybe Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are a bit outliers. They're both outlier circuits. That's the other thing as well. We've had 2 races. The first 2 races are very outliers. Bahrain, high abrasion. Saudi, the high speed and chaotic nature of it. After this, I think we go a bit more conventional with things. So, yeah, overall, not bad. Not a bad start, but not a great start. And he's hoping that throughout the season, you can see development from teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, and particularly Aston Martin, because they have a lot of wind development tunnel time at the minute. until it gets reset, until it gets adjusted in July. And Red Bull's penalty, obviously, hopefully, will take some effect in the second half of the season and into next season. So, yeah, he's hoping for things improve. Yeah, and that's it, really. Thank you so much for watching, listening, whatever you're doing. And yeah, leave a rating if you're listening on Spotify, and leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment on YouTube. Yeah, cheers, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.